Which country is the best at hockey?
Alright, so we all know Canada's 1, USA is 2, but who's the third best team in the international stage?
In today's video, we cover international hockey with Greg Wyshynski.
Again, it's very cute that you guys think you're better than the US.
And stay tuned for some juicy NHL topics.
Their goaltending has been borderline disastrous.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the BTR podcast. We're once again joined by a very special guest returning to talk some NHL. So without further ado, let me introduce him. He's now the newly re-signed senior NHL writer for ESPN. You could catch him on various different podcasts and TV or talk shows, radio shows across Canada and the US. He hosts his own podcast called The Drop with Arda O'Kell, which you could catch on the NHL on ESPN YouTube channel and various audio platforms. And as you could probably see by his tweets on Sundays, usually he's the president of the Zach Wilson fan club. We're joined by Greg Wyshynski, who looks more prepared than us by the way he's dressed. But yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, no, I don't usually get this gussied up. You can see the tie here. Microphone's kind of in the way. I don't usually get this gussied up for podcasts, but it's a game night, so I'm heading to watch the Rangers as we tape this podcast.
Yeah. First of all, that was a joke. I don't think he's a fan of Zach Wilson, but you could tell by his tweets. But
he was a fan last game.
I mean, I don't know if I was a fan last game. Again, I was trying to tell somebody the other day, like, this is exactly what the existence of a Jets fan is, which is that even when you win, it's complicated. Like, this guy sucks. He's a bad quarterback, and yet, for 1 week, he looked great, and they won the game. So you're left wondering, okay, what does this season look like if they didn't bench him? Is he actually okay? And you're right back at square one, trying to figure out exactly what you have in this kid, and that's the tortured existence of a Jets fan.
Yeah. We'll get right into it. First off, congratulations on the new contract.
Thanks.
I don't know if it's Shohei figures, but but we'll see.
But I mean, based on the numbers, I hope there's some deferred money. That'd be great.
All right, we'll get right into it. You reported a couple of weeks ago. We talked a lot when we brought you on last time. We talked about the international, how it could help promote the NHL across the world, not even just the US. But simple question: your reaction to the international, I guess, not so World Cup stage coming back, because we had two different reactions. We agreed with each other, but my reaction was more on the positive side, where it was, I'm just ready to see some best on best, Crosby versus McDavid versus Matthews, Hughes brothers teaming up against McCarr and them, right? His reaction was like, it's not really a World Cup though. So like, how is it really best on best, so on and so forth. So where do you rely on that, those two takes, and what is your take in general?
Well, my take is that it's not going to be a World Cup. They're not going to call it a World Cup, which is to me like the thing that made me turn me around on it a little bit. If they tried to pretend that it was a World Cup, it's not. I mean, you're not going to have Russia involved in any way. To call it a best on best tournament when some of your top 20 players aren't going to participate in the tournament doesn't make any sense as far as trying to pretend that it's something that's not. So once we got past that and decided to kind of just make it centered on the US and Canada, Finland and Sweden, then I was kind of cool with it. Like, I've always liked the idea of there being some sort of like a Ryder Cup type deal in the middle of the season where you can put the showcase on some of your best players, and then really amp up the rivalries. And, two of the best rivalries in hockey are clearly the US and Canada, and Sweden and Finland, which has been a rivalry for ages. So I like it. I like the concept. I think it's going to work. And I think the people that generally have a problem with them shutting down the season for this, prefab, not World Cup tournament are probably going to get turned around, like you said, pretty quick when they see Crosby skating with McDavid and when they see the Canucks and the Hugheses on the same team. We've been waiting so long to see this generation of players get a chance to play on a national team together that I feel like people are going to kind of put their hang-ups aside and really enjoy the hockey for a couple weeks.
All right, so we all know Canada's 1, USA is 2, but who's the third best team in the international stage?
I mean, that's a good question. I imagine it's probably Sweden, based on the totality of talent. Although I'd have to kind of meditate on who's playing goal for them these days.
Russia's included in this, assuming in the future they'll be back. So if that helps with it as well.
Well, I mean, I still think Sweden and Finland are better than Russia. To be honest with you, like Russia's got great goaltending, but you're gonna have to supplant some of the depth on that team. I think with like KHL players, inevitably. I don't know. I think Sweden and Finland are both pretty strong sides. Again, it's very cute that you guys think you're better than the U.S. I wonder again, like you're coming to war, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight with your goaltending, and we go 5 deep. Like Jeremy Swayman would be the best goalie on Canada right now.
Oh yeah,
and he's our
probably.
fifth guy. He's our fifth guy.
We saw your article on ESPN putting the US team, and trust me, we're a little bit like, damn, you have like 3 or 4 Canucks on that roster, so like we still got to go against them. But outside of that, like jokes aside, we're genuinely like scared when we play because it's gonna be like,
well,
okay.
But the problem, see, this is the problem though, is that like our level of talent and depth at important positions has now enabled you guys to go back to your usual default setting, which is that we're the scrappy Canadian underdogs. You do, can I say shit? I just said it. You
Go
do
ahead.
this
No,
all
you're
the
good.
time in World Juniors where like you have the best talent in the world and it's always like we overcame incredible odds to win a tournament. We always win. Like you guys love to pretend you're the underdogs in this stuff and you never are. And even in this case, you probably won't be because you're still rolling Crosby, McDavid, and McKinnon on probably like the same line together. So while the U.S. has tactical advantages in some areas, they're still young. The sum total of their talent might not add up to anything. In that story that I wrote, I talked to Mike Modano, and he had a really good point about the Canadians, which is that the secret to their success is their guys always knew how to like play as a team. And we were just like a collection of talented players. And I think that could ultimately be the undoing of the Americans. Like you've got to get guys like the Kachucks and the Hugheses and whoever to kind of play roles on that team in some cases. And for whatever reason, the Canadians have always been able to do it with like having the most talented guys on your fourth line and knowing that they're going to be able to play their role. And the Americans, you know, there's a reason why like guys like Ryan Callahan have been all-stars in the past because we need grunts. And our star players don't always know how to be grunts. So I still think that you guys are the favorites going into the tournament, even though on paper the U.S. is deeper and better.
Do you agree that it's the closest as it has ever been?
Yeah, because it is because the Americans finally have like this generation has the kind of skill players that the U.S. had in the 90s when they won the Canada Cup, right? Like or the World Cup or whatever the hell they won in 96. You know, that was a team that had like Uronic and Modano and Leach and, you know, these big Hall of Fame level players that LaFontaine that could compete against, or at least be in the same conversation against a Sakic or a Mario or whoever the Canada's thrown out there. Right. And so that was true for a little bit. And then throughout the 90s, going into like all the way to Sochi, it's kind of like, who was our best skill player? Patrick Kane? And then what else is there? You know, so there was an entire like 15-year run, most of the run actually of the US, of the NHL being in the Olympics, where the Americans simply didn't have the same level of skill player, high-end skill player that the Canadians did. But now, you know, to roll out Matthews and the Hugheses and the Kachucks and Eichel and you know, McAvoy and all these guys and all the goalies, it does seem like it's more even playing field because the high end players are there for the US in a way that they weren't in the previous Olympics.
All right. I alluded to Shohei Ohtani earlier, so just a fun question here. Who, if the NHL were to get some type of contract incentives like how Major League Baseball does, which player is most likely to sign the Ohtani contract? Is it as simple as to say it's just McDavid?
Yeah, I think it's probably simple to say it's McDavid, but it's essentially going to be whoever hits the open market. I mean, like, you know, is there a better chance that McDavid or Draisaitl hits free agency? I don't know the answer. I assume it's McDavid. But yeah, I mean, I think that he's probably the guy that would sign that deal. And it would probably be a deal that gets signed elsewhere with a team that needs to do it, you know, needs to defer money, needs to get creative accounting. Like, you know, you could see McDavid going to the Rangers and the Rangers are capped out and they're like, well, we figured out a way, like if it was ever legal to do so within the confines of the NHL cap.
All right, we're gonna just get some quick reactions on some teams here. So we'll start off with the Canucks. We are now over a quarter of the way through. Do you know who this team is now? Because when we talked to you last time, it was, are they gonna sustain this? Clearly not. Now, recently they've been about 500-ish in the last couple of games. But yeah, thoughts on the Canucks? Are they still a playoff team? Yeah.
Are they still a playoff team? My God, you guys are spoiled. You get out to that start, you become like a 500 team for a little bit. You still have Besser scoring goals and everybody playing pretty well. Like, you know, it was going to level off at some point, but of course it's a playoff team. I mean, you know, the bottom line about the Pacific right now is that the top three might, I mean, it's going to take a lot of effort for those top three not to be the top three, based on how many points they've banked and based on how well they've played. I mean, the Oilers have been charging up from the rear, winning 7 in a row as we do this podcast, and have gotten back to 500, but there's still a significant distance between them and the wild card still. So I'm not worried in the least about Vancouver. I think I knew they were a playoff team before the season. I think they're still a playoff team.
I mean, the only reason we ask it because we've been in so much pain the last 5 years.
I know.
Like every time we see bad hockey, we're like, oh, we're back.
Well, you guys know I've talked about in the past, like this inherent negativity from the Canucks fans exists because you guys don't know how to be happy. Like you don't know how to be content. You always assume that, you know, I relate to that as a Jets fan. Again, like, you know, if the Jets were like 12-4 at this point, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. You know, like I'd find reasons to complain. I'd be like, our punters should be better or some such. So like, yeah, I completely understand it, but yeah, like you guys are fine. There's no reason to worry.
All right. This question is basically, I'm going to base it on the Hughes brother. Obviously, Hughes and McCarr. What are their chances for Hart? And then my follow-up question would be, can all three of the Hughes brothers win their trophy? Like Jack Hughes with the Hart, Quinn with the Norris, Luke Hughes with the Calder.
I think there's a better chance of the latter happening than Quinn winning the Hart. If only because I think he's obviously, like, as we saw in the latest awards watch, has a pretty significant lead for the Norris. McCarr is going to be right there at the end, obviously. Luke has a path to the Calder. It may take, I mean, if he beats Bedard in points, which is not mathematically insane to say right now, especially since Luke's going to have a larger role on the team with Dougie Hamilton out, then I think he's got a reasonable case to win the Calder. And if the Devils make the playoffs on the back of a Jack Hughes season where he's like top 2 in points per game, I would think he can easily win the Hart. The trick, though, is that I think if a defenseman wins the Hart, it's going to be McCarr. And it's going to be McCarr because I think that he will be demonstrably better than everybody else on the Avalanche this year, McKinnon included. And I also think because there's already sort of that thought process amongst the voters of, okay, you know, he's the rookie of the year. He's the Norris guy. He's been a Norris finalist every year but his rookie year. We gave him the Conn Smythe. You know, there's this whole kind of thought process of him being elite awards guy to begin with. And Quinn's never even been top 3 for the Norris, if memory serves. So I think that it's already kind of in the ether that if we're going to make a defenseman the MVP, it'll probably end up being McCarr. And also, like, because McCarr is seen as a modern day Bobby Orr, and Bobby Orr is one of only 2 defensemen since the 1970s to win the Hart, the other one being Pronger.
Yeah. Okay, so in our view, the Kings were like the underrated, not talked about much team. But I guess, I know there still kind of are, but there's another team that I think has jumped them now, and it's from Canada. It's the Winnipeg Jets. What are your reaction to Winnipeg's season so far? Did you expect this from them?
No, I mean, not at all. And you have to give Kevin Cheveldayoff credit for, you know, doubling down and sticking to his guns on Scheifele and Hellebuck, not only to keep them around to sign them, but to keep them around knowing that maybe he had a team where if they stay, they could do some things. You know, injuries are kind of a concern now, I think. And I think they've been the beneficiary of some pretty poor play within the division by some other teams. But they've been a big surprise, and you got to give them their flowers for playing as well as they have.
All right. So the Capitals are playing well too, but it's not because of Ovechkin. So how much of a surprise that is? And like, what is the take on Ovechkin catching Gretzky as well?
Well, it makes no sense. Like if the Capitals were going to be a playoff contender this year, and right now they're in a playoff position in the Metro Division, to have Ovechkin with the goal total that he has, and to have the worst power play in the league percentage wise as the Capitals do, you would have never guessed that. I mean, their power play and Ovechkin have been the bread and butter for that team for the last 15 years, even more than that. So the fact that they are where they are and they're doing so without 2 of their mainstay components not clicking, and without Backstrom too, who obviously walked away from the team, has been nothing short of remarkable. Spencer Carberry's certainly done a really, really good job there, and has gotten the benefit of some great goaltending too. The Ovechkin Gretzky thing, we covered that on the drop this week, me and Arda, and took kind of a deep dive into why his goal scoring has trailed off the way it has this season, and also the impact that it's had on the Gretzky chase. And it's become depressingly obvious that if he continues to score at the rate that he's scoring this season, not only will he end up with under 20 goals, which is by far the lowest total he'll have for his career, but it's going to really set the Gretzky chase back in a pretty significant way, where, he was like 122 games away based on his career scoring rates. And based on his scoring rate this season, that goes up to like 300 games. Like he's doing some major damage to the chase. And it's kind of depressing to think about it, because I think we were all really hoping and really anticipating that he was going to put it, assault that record in a pretty significant way.
Yeah, it sucks that like he had a lockout year, half a lockout year, a pandemic shortened year, and another pandemic shortened. He probably would have beaten it by now if that was the case.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, no doubt. I mean, he certainly did. It wasn't the the benefit of any positive scheduling from the league. Things are out of his control. And then, of course, that one year when Dale Hunter was the coach, that was also out of his control. And Dale Hunter tried to get him to like block shots instead of score goals, which was asinine.
All right. In the Eastern Conference, the Flyers are probably the surprising team that might fall. But who's your most disappointing team? Is it the Devils, Canes, or the Lightning so far?
I would say it's the Devils, but the Devils have some like excuses. I mean, they had Hughes and Heischer out of the lineup for a good spell, which it didn't enable them to succeed, but also didn't enable them to really kind of like find their game as they struggled at 5-on-5. And then they've lost Dougie Hamilton now. Their goaltending hasn't been anywhere near as it was good as it was last year. So there are reasons why this is happening. The Canes, though, are a real head scratcher, because like it's pretty much the same team as last year. Their goaltending has been borderline disastrous. They've not really played to their identity. The Devils, when you look at them, you're like, I get why this is happening. The Canes are a bit more of a head scratcher, and that's why they might be even more of a disappointment than the Devils at this point.
All right, so we've seen some coach firings happen. So if there's any predictions for the next one to be fired, or any that's like boiling on the hot seat right now?
Yeah. Well, I have a coach's hot seat piece on ESPN this week, and the hottest seat's still DJ Smith with the Ottawa Senators, because of the new owner, because of the interim GM, because the team hasn't found any success, and the players like him, and I think the team kind of likes him too. But at some point, the blame has to fall somewhere, and it usually is on the coach. The one that's funny though is Lane Lambert with the Islanders, who I think if you asked Islander fans about a week ago, do you want this guy fired? They'd all say yes. Now they're like second in the Metro.
I heard you said on Halpern and Bruff, I believe it was going to be Lane Lambert.
For sure. And then like half of them are probably still like fire the guy. And then, it's hard to it's hard to rationalize it when they're playing as well as they are and picking up points. So I think the only in-season scorching hot seat is Smith. And then there's a number of guys, Lambert being one of them, that might get reevaluated after the season.
All right, last question before we close it out here. You picked the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup. Now that they're on this hot streak, are you back on that bandwagon?
Dude, to be back on the bandwagon would indicate I ever jumped off the bandwagon, which I sure as hell have not. I knew they'd be fine. Like they just got off the hop on the wrong foot. And then like Connor went cold, and they made the coaching change, and all their under the hood analytics have always been pretty strong this season. It's just a matter of execution, better goaltending, and getting guys to finish the chances that McDavid was creating. And all those things have kind of moved in the right direction. I'm confident they're going to be a playoff team. And then once they get in it, they could win it.
Sorry, last question here. The Flames are kind of in a weird spot where they're kind of doing okay, but will they be the biggest seller coming up to the trade deadline? They already traded Zadorov to the Canucks, but
yeah, they
else?
should be. Like I know that they're like a bubble team, or they're hovering around it, or they're getting a sniff of it, and it's all very exciting. But again, like maybe they don't have the ability to take a step back and see what they really have there. But what they really have there is a supporting cast in search of a star. And that's the way it's always going to be. I mean, they had two guys. They had Gaudreau and they had Tkachuk. The team was built around those two guys. Those two guys leave. What do you have left? You have a supporting cast. And so, they've got talented players. but I think they ultimately have to figure out what the next step for the franchise is. And I don't think it's necessarily to build around what's on the roster now. I think the best thing that could happen to Vancouver, or to Calgary, is for them to, start to maybe modulate their roster a little bit in the hopes of increasing their draft bounty at some point, because that's kind of where I think the organization needs to go.
All right, Greg, we appreciate you hopping on with us. I know you're busy today, especially with I think you're doing the Rangers game.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, though, just promote your work. Where can people find you? Anything upcoming on the drop you want to promote right now? That I think you said something about the Connors, ranking Connors in the
Yeah.
But
We ranked Connors on a recent episode. We did a full Connor ranking both in the NHL and in life. And in life means also in fiction. So do check that out on the last episode. You can find all my writing at ESPN.com. And then if you want my stuff that's sort of not hockey centric, you can go to the Puck Soup Patreon, which is Patreon.com/Puck Soup. And you can listen to Mise en Pod, which is a food TV podcast that I do, and then a podcast called Overrated, Underrated, Favorite, Least Favorite, in which we tackle one subject and apply that test to it. And this month we did the original Die Hard, the overrated, underrated, and our favorite and least favorite aspects of Die Hard, which was a lot of fun.
Okay. Everything will be linked down below as well. Once again, Greg, appreciate you hopping on during this busy time. And to everybody else watching, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.